Welcome to the Fearfully and Wonderfully Me podcast, a podcast designed to help you increase your influence, develop your leadership, and maximize your results. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode on self-care and I create my habits is the affirmation for this chapter in this element. And I think that this is possibly one of my favorite elements of growth and transformation, but probably not in the way that most people would think. A lot of times when we talk about self-care, we talk about the concept of filling ourselves back up, right? You cannot pour from an empty cup. And so it's important to make sure that we're, practicing renewal in our own life so that we have something to give to others. And so self care looks like a lot of different things. When most people talk about it, it looks like, making sure to take a bubble bath when you get stressed or, taking a walk. And those things are important and they're an important element of self-care. There's no doubt. But I like to talk about it from a slightly different perspective. I like to talk about it in terms of the habits that we have and the daily behaviors that we have, and are they helping us or hurting us? Because habits are powerful things. James Hunter said, the good news is that human beings are bundles of habits. The bad news is human beings are bundles of habits. And you think of how much of our behavior is simply something that we carry out on autopilot, a habit. For example, I've used the analogy before. You come in from somewhere, the grocery store, come in from work, you probably have a pretty consistent routine on where you put your purse, where you put your keys. And this is a habit and a behavior. You don't think about it. You don't walk in the door every time you come home now and go, gee, where should I put my keys today? Right? Most of the time you just set them there and it's automatic. And then when you get ready to leave, they're right there. That's a habit that serves you well. It's a system that you've created so that you don't have to think about every single time you come in or leave the house, where should I put my keys? Where did I put my keys? Um, but how much of our action and behavior throughout our entire day has been determined or been decided by us to be a habit, to be put on autopilot. Now, habits are incredibly powerful because we aren't consciously thinking about them. That allows us the mental capacity to think about the things we need to be thinking about. We don't need to think about every reflex. It's much like, blinking. You don't need to be spending your time and your mental energy thinking about blinking. You don't need to be spending your mental time and energy about the little habits that we have. What I want you to spend some time thinking about now, though, is number one, what habits do I have that are helping me? What habits do I have that aren't serving me well? And how could I improve on them? Spending a little bit of time intentionally and consciously thinking through those habits. Do we need to make some changes on some of them? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe some of them are very positive. Keep doing those. Maybe some of them can just be tweaked. Maybe that's something to look at. And then once you get back into the new routine or the new habit or the habit that serves you a little better, then you no longer have to keep thinking about it every day. It's just something, a more positive habit you've created. So when we talk about habits, when we break them down, there is a very consistent pattern. There is a trigger or a stimulus of some kind that cues the response or the behavior that we make in reaction. And then there is the reward that we get for whatever behavior we carried through. So, for example, I used to love Diet Coke, and not just, I wouldn't drink it at home really, but I had a habit when we would go out to eat, I would automatically order a Diet Coke. I didn't even think about it. It was just something that, we would go out to eat about once a week and I would order a Diet Coke. And like I said, I didn't drink a lot of Diet Coke at home. I knew it was bad for me, but it was sort of just a habit to treat myself to the Diet Coke, fountain Coke especially, when we would go out to eat. Now I know Diet Coke is not good for me. It just is not. But it wasn't that I just had to have it all the time. It was just simply that I had created that habit in my life. I had a diet soda habit, if you want to think of it like that. And over the years, I transitioned from drinking regular Cokes, which is probably a good thing not to have so much sugar, but the artificial stuff probably isn't much, if any, better. And there again, I wasn't drinking enormous amounts of it, but when I looked at that habit, that's not really helping me be the healthiest version of myself all the time. So to me, I see, there again, there's a difference between, hey, intentionally treating yourself today, indulging a little bit within moderation, within reason, and just carrying through on ordering Diet Coke just because you always do, right? There's a difference in that. One is intentionally thinking through, hey, this bowl of ice cream, yeah, it's not going to be the greatest, but I'm going to keep it in moderation. It's an indulgence. It's an occasional treat. That's definitely, to me, a clear difference in behavior and level of intent than just automatically eating half a bag of chips when you come home from work every day or school every day. So it's not easy to think through our habits. Number one, it requires us to honestly sit down and evaluate what habits do I have that are or are not serving me. So, for example, most probably, I haven't even looked up the statistics on this, but I would bet that most people in our culture and society today get up first thing in the morning and reach for their cell phone. They either are checking emails or they're checking Instagram or they're checking Facebook. It's like one of the first things most people do first thing in the morning. It's a habit that most people, not all, certainly, I'm sure there are people who don't do that, but it's a habit that a lot of people have created is they wake up and maybe even before they get out of bed, they're reaching for that cell phone and they're allowing whatever pops up to influence them, at least in some way, the rest of their day. So the trigger is waking up. The response is picking up the cell phone, and the reward is the dopamine feeling that you get from your Facebook likes or your Instagram or your email number of emails, right? We are biologically triggered to be rewarded by some of that stimulus. And there's nothing wrong with that. But is that habit serving you well? I know a few years back, I thought, you know what, that's not serving me well. In setting my intentions for the day and setting my energy for the day, I protect that first early part of the morning vigilantly, right? That is something that I protect very, very strictly because it sets the mood and tone and intentions for the rest of my day. And my entire day goes better if I get up and very intentionally spend a few minutes thinking about my morning routine, just like what is in my motivational planning journals, right? It doesn't have to be a long routine. I spend a few minutes thinking about what I'm grateful for, a few minutes thinking about just anything that's on my mind, some reflection, um, thoughts about the day before, perhaps. What could I do better? What could I have done better? There's a motivational quote in each of my journals. So every day has a motivational quote around a certain theme. There's room for me to list my priorities for the day, just three top priorities. Like, what are the most important three things today? I think through how I can lead myself better and a couple other things, but it's designed to help me be very intentional around one little part of each dimension of my life, physically, mentally, emotionally, spirituals, or values based, because I want to just take just 5 minutes. You guys, this does not take long. And you don't even have to use my journal. There's tons of ways that you can be intentional in the first few moments of your day without sitting down to write a journal. Journaling is just what works for me. Figure out what works for you. I guarantee you, whatever's on that Facebook or email can wait 3 or 4 more minutes. It can. Because if you'd have slept 3 or 4 more minutes, it would have been fine. The world would not have come to an end. But you will feel better and more equipped to face the day. And I get a little excited talking about that because I've just leveraged how powerful it is for me and aligning my energy around what I need to do, what I want to do for the rest of the day. So back to my Diet Coke habit. It wasn't easy at first, but when I realized that habit was not serving me, I needed to rethink that. So you can do that in a couple different ways. You can rethink what the trigger is. Is there a way that I can eliminate that trigger that is cueing that behavior that's not serving me well? In my case, no, I couldn't eliminate going out to eat all the time. Maybe I can eliminate it some of the time, but we are going to go out to eat sometimes, and so that's a trigger that I couldn't eliminate completely. So I needed to rethink the behavior in response to the trigger, right? The trigger's not going anywhere. So I need to rethink the behavior. And this is where it comes in adopting better habits. So when you think about that, a lot of times our habits are behaviors that we've created in response to stress. For example, if you always have, let's say, potato chips. You love potato chips. And whenever you have a really stressful day, you treat yourself to some potato chips. And there again, intentionally saying, hey, I'm going to choose this food or this method of behavior or whatever this action is, intentionally knowing it's not maybe the best, but as an occasional indulgence, that's different than just every day saying, man, I'm having a stressful day. Let me turn to this behavior to numb or to cope or to deal with whatever. And pretty soon you're doing that so consistently, you don't even think about it, and you've built up an entire habit around a behavior that's not serving you well. This requires a very thorough or very honest, maybe that might be a better word, review of your habits. So I encourage you, obviously, if you are like driving, don't do this, but the next time you get to a place where you're reflecting and thinking, take a few minutes and get on a sheet of paper and think, just write down all of, or at least a good chunk, maybe all of them, of the habits that you have. So for example, start first thing in the morning. When you open your eyes first thing in the morning, what do you automatically do? Brush your teeth. So you would write down, brush my teeth, right? That's just a habit that you do first thing in the morning. So that's probably a pretty good habit for you. My point here is that you get to decide if this habit is positive and helping me or not. And that's just an honest evaluation of what habits do I have and first, and then just saying, you know what, not judging myself, not beating myself up. Uh, my perspective on habits is going to be different than your perspective on habits. So for me, not checking my cell phone the first few minutes of my morning is important to me. You might feel like that's a habit that works well for you, and that's okay. You get to decide if your habits are helping you or hurting you. So write down a sheet of paper, just all the habits that you can think of. Think through as you get up, what's your morning routine? What happens the first hour of your day? The next few hours of your day, getting into mid-morning lunch. Maybe there's a 3 a.m. cookie habit that doesn't serve you well. I used to have a 3 a.m. or not 3 a.m., 3 p.m. afternoon snacking habit. And, it would just be that afternoon where I'm like, I just want a little snack of something. And there again, intentionally listening to my body and saying, I'm hungry, my body needs energy, let me go eat some carrot sticks is much different than hitting 3 p.m. and saying, gee, it's time for a donut, cookie, whatever. So for me, I needed to think through that 3 p.m. eating habit. Could I just replace it with a cup of green tea instead? This is powerful exercise because our habits, again, they are either taking us in the direction that we want to go or they're not. And so without judgment, just list your habits down and put a plus sign by every habit that is positive. You want to keep that's working for you, that's great. And maybe just a little star asterisk by one or two habits that you want to improve on. Maybe you have more on that list that aren't helping you. That's okay. I just want you to start small and slowly work on one or two habits at a time. Don't try to tackle the whole list because the bigger we start, the easier it is to derail ourselves. So many of our habits are in the physical dimension, especially habits around what we eat or drink. We kind of tend to get in a routine. Where you prefer to grocery shop is a habit. You probably have a couple of stores that you like to shop at, and you know the layout of the store. And let me tell you, it was funny. It was stressful to me when we moved out of state, and I had to learn not just a different city and how to drive, but how to navigate different grocery stores. And that seems so silly, but it's interesting how I had gotten in the habit of creating my grocery list around the aisles of the grocery store that I shopped at. That was a good habit. It served me well in saving time. I would just write my grocery list down in order of the aisles of the store. But when I started shopping in a different store, I had to totally learn a new layout so that I could write my grocery list in this new layout. And I think I spent 2.5 hours that first day wandering around the store looking for stuff, trying to find stuff and where it was. Anyway, so a lot of our habits are in the physical dimension of life, but habits can be emotional too. And these are very powerful. Like, for example, is there um, a behavior that you do in response to something emotional? Maybe a trigger that happens that causes you to think of something painful in your life or something that was painful in your past. And so emotionally, perhaps you withdraw. Maybe there is something that triggers you to stop communicating whenever you're in a situation. This is something that I've realized we don't always think about, but I know there's certainly things and times when I do that. Emotional habits are just as impactful as physical habits. There are times when I feel myself wanting to withdraw and just, pull back from whatever the conversation is because of maybe a trigger that's happened, and my emotional response is to pull back. But that doesn't always serve me well in solving the problem or whatever we're communicating about in the first place. So, for example, uh, when someone gets loud and raises their tone of voice for whatever reason, maybe they're not even really angry, but they raise their tone of voice, they get louder, they get a little more aggressive. My emotional habit in response to that is to pull back, right? I retreat to silence. When someone starts getting more aggressive in a conversation or in dialogue, my response automatically behavior is to retreat. So, there again, just being conscious of our habits, I recognize that that doesn't always serve me well. And so I'm much more empowered to overcome that. Just being aware of it is the first step to changing it. So, are there times when I still withdraw into silence? Absolutely. Catch myself going through that. The trigger happens, my response. But there are also times when I'm more equipped to say, no, I'm not going to retreat into silence just because of a cue or trigger. I'm going to step forward into dialogue and keep resolving the conversation or the issue. Works much better for me. But it only works better for me when I'm aware of that behavior in myself and then able to overcome it. It's emotionally hitting the pause button, right? The pause button is being proactive and responding based on values instead of the emotions of the moment. And so much of our habits are created around the emotions that we have in the moment. Now, there again, I'm not asking you to rethink every habit you have. I'm just suggesting that you think about the habits that are contributing to your growth and helping you achieve your goals. Now, you may have some awesome habits already, but just remember what Michael Josephson said. One of my favorite quotes: you don't have to be sick to get better. Next episode, we're going to actually talk about drilling down into some of the health habits and some of the heart habits and helping us rethink through some of those. Until next time.